Well, joining us now from New Brunswick, New Jersey, is Sahar Aziz. She's a professor of law at Rutgers University. Welcome to Al Jazeera. So I'm sure you watched the protests, or at least are aware of the protests at Trump Tower earlier. What does it mean, in your opinion, for Jewish voices to be involved in these demonstrations over the arrest and possible deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, given, of course, that Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, says his arrest, in part, is about stamping out anti-Semitism?
Well, the vast majority of organizations, special interest groups and their followers who have been lobbying and advocating for the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil, as well as many other Palestinian and Arab students who are green card holders, have been Zionist organizations. Right? They self-describe themselves as pro-Israeli Zionist organizations and claiming that they represent all Jews in America, which, as Jewish Voice for Peace shows, that is not true. However, unfortunately, the pro-Israeli and Zionist groups have a significantly more influence in Congress. Congressional leaders are listening to them more than they're listening to JVP. And in fact, what we're seeing is congressional hearings focused on combating anti-Semitism when the facts show that there has been nationwide anti-Palestinian racism and anti-Muslim bias across college campuses as well. So we're not seeing equal treatment. And we are seeing mistaking free speech, protest, and dissent with U.S. foreign policy as a threat to the civil rights of a particular religious group. And if that were, in fact, the standard, then every time some group were to protest against Iran or protest against Qatar or protest against Saudi Arabia or any other Muslim majority state, we would call that Islamophobia. But Congress does not do that.
Understood. I mean, what we saw at Trump Tower comes shortly off the back of what we heard from Donald Trump earlier in the day, calling Senator Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking elected Jewish official in the U.S., a Palestinian. I mean, he used to be Jewish, said Trump. Now he's Palestinian. I mean, what does that mean for the president of the U.S. to be using Palestinian as a kind of slur?
It shows the depth and the mainstreaming of racism against Palestinians, which is just one step away from the racism against Arabs and against Muslims. And so, as I have argued in my book, The Racial Muslim, we've had over 20 years of the racialization of everyone who's associated in any way with the Middle East. And right now it's coming to a pinnacle through the identity of Palestinians as being a terrorist supporter. So if you dissent with the government, you're a terrorist supporter. If you exercise your free speech, you're a terrorist supporter. If you have the identity of a Palestinian, a Muslim, or an Arab, and now you're being called that as a racial slur. Imagine if Trump did the same thing where he called somebody Jewish as a racial slur to connote some very common anti-Semitic trope. That would be completely unacceptable. And yet you're not seeing any response in the U.S. from universities. You're not seeing protection for Muslim and Arab students by universities. And so it's unfortunate that it's only Jewish Voice for Peace and many progressive groups that are coming to the defense of Mahmoud Khalil, when in fact what's happening to him is a threat to all Americans for their free speech rights. And I just want to note one other thing. Mahmoud Khalil was abducted. He was kidnapped at night from a public street by a government agency. That is exactly what we used to see in the Arab Spring or in countries like Libya and Iraq by notorious dictators. And yet we just witnessed that in the United States. And why was he abducted by the government? Because he disagrees with government foreign policy. This is textbook authoritarianism.
Sahar Aziz, good to have you on Al Jazeera. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.